The void tore itself apart above Vos Primaris, the largest forge world in Segmentum Solar. A scream of ruptured reality that turned the stars to molten gold. Astropaths convulsed, Mechanicus seers fell to their knees, and the machine spirit of the orbital auger arrays wept streams of binary static. Something was emerging from the rent between realms, not demon, not warp spawn, but something else entirely. The Magi of Mars demanded containment protocols. The Imperial Navy readied for exterminators if contagion was detected, and across the data vaults of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, a single phrase repeated in vox distortion: "She falls, the daughter of light falls." Through that burning wound came a body encased in plasma fire, cutting through the atmosphere like a divine meteor. It struck the surface outside Hive Kronax, the impact leveling an entire district, and for days the area was quarantined, considered a potential Xenos incursion zone. When at last the Inquisition authorized investigation, what they found was not alien horror, but a woman kneeling in the center of a crater of glassed earth, alive, unburned, her blonde hair adrift in the heat shimmer, her body encased in strange blue material that had survived re-entry. Her eyes opened, twin suns of calm defiance. "I mean no harm," she said softly, her voice cutting through the static like hymn song. The squad of Skitarii surrounding her hesitated. Their sensors registered power levels beyond any known human parameters. She raised her hands slowly, palms outward, and from her chest glimmered the familiar sigil that would one day be recorded in the archives of the Inquisition as the unfamiliar mark, an ancient S-shaped crest with no human reference. "My name is Kara Zor-El," she said. "I am not your enemy." Days later, she stood before Inquisitor Seraphine de Vaughan, a woman of the Ordo Hereticus whose eyes burned with the zeal of absolute faith. "You claim to come from beyond the stars, beyond even the warp," the Inquisitor said. Kara nodded. "My world is gone. My cousin and I were sent away as children. I don't know how I arrived here." De Vaughan regarded her with suspicion that bordered on awe. "You speak of cousin. Where is he?" Kara's expression faltered, memories flickering like broken glass. "Dead," she whispered, though her heart doubted it. The Inquisitor gestured to the surrounding Mechanicus observers. "Then his kind walks these stars as well. Emperor, preserve us." The trials began. Tests of psychic corruption, exposure to sanctified relics. She endured them all without falter. Where a lesser being would have burned, Kara merely glowed brighter. When asked her purpose, she answered simply, "To protect, to save life where it still struggles to survive." De Vaughan's tone turned ice. "Protection without sanction breeds heresy. You are too powerful to be trusted. The Emperor alone decides who saves humanity." Kara's gaze softened, sadness more than defiance. "Where I come from, power doesn't decide who is worthy of protection. Life does." Days later, as the trial continued, Vos Primaris burned. An orc, drawn by the Forge World's energies, descended from orbit. Mechanicus legions mobilized, Titans strode across the plains, but the assault was overwhelming. Amid the chaos, Kara escaped her confinement, not out of rebellion, but necessity. Through the firestorms she flew, her fists tearing through orc dropships before they could unload their hordes. For the first time in recorded Imperial history, pict feeds showed a lone figure carving a path through a greenskin invasion. When Titans fell, she lifted their ruined forms to rescue trapped crews. When an orc warboss the size of a dreadnought charged the final defense line, Kara caught his cleaver mid-swing and crushed the weapon to molten scrap. The Mechanicus priests called it the miracle of Kronax. The Inquisition called it a dangerous anomaly. Days later, with the orc threat extinguished, Inquisitor de Vaughan stood before her as Imperial banners rose over the ruined hive. "You saved millions," the Inquisitor said. "You also defied Imperial command, stole restricted technology, and unleashed abilities no mortal should possess." Kara answered calmly, "I did what was right." De Vaughan's eyes narrowed. "In this Imperium, Right and wrong are luxuries. Only survival matters. You misunderstand where you've landed, alien. Kara's expression turned distant. I understand perfectly. That's why you're losing. The words hung like blasphemy. She was to be executed, but before the order could be carried out, a new threat emerged. Warp storms tearing open above Voss's orbit. From within them, ships of twisted design bled into reality, hulls bearing the mark of the Dark Mechanicum. The Dark Forge legions, servants of the Omnissiah's shadow, had come to claim the Forge world's soul. In the chaos that followed, Devon and Kara found themselves trapped together in a collapsing spire. When a demon engine tore through the walls, it was Kara who shielded the Inquisitor with her own body, absorbing a blast of hellfire that would have atomized a Baneblade. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun. For an instant, the planet believed it had lost its savior, but then through the smoke she rose again, skin scorched, eyes burning like twin novas. Enough, she whispered, and the very air trembled. The demon engine lunged. Kara met it with a strike that shattered its frame and silenced its bound spirit. She turned toward the rift, still boiling in the heavens. You fight corruption with corruption, she said to the stunned Inquisitor. I'll fight it with light. And she ascended into the storm. What happened next entered Mechanicus legend. Alone she flew into the warp breach, her body radiating power no Auspex could quantify. Within that storm, corrupted ships burned like candles in a supernova. Demons shrieked as her heat vision cut through their essence. When she emerged again, the skies above Voss were clear. The rift had sealed. The storm had ended. But so too had something within her. She fell unconscious, her body carried to an orbital sanctum where the Inquisition debated her fate. Devon argued for her preservation, not from mercy, but from fear of what her death might unleash. When Kara awoke, she was surrounded by figures clad in gold, the Adeptus Custodes. You are summoned to terror, said one. The Emperor will decide your fate. The journey through the warp tested her more than any battle. She saw things through her enhanced senses that no mortal should witness. Souls screaming in endless distortion, titanic forms of chaos pressing against the Geller field, whispering promises of divinity. One voice stood apart, seductive and cruel. You burn bright, child of Krypton. Serve me, and I will make you eternal. Kara clenched her fists until the hull groaned. I serve no one, she hissed, and the whispers faded. Upon reaching Terra, she walked the labyrinthine corridors of the Imperial Palace, each step shadowed by Custodes and silent sisters whose null auras pressed against her mind like suffocating silence. Finally, she entered the throne chamber, a space so vast and radiant it bent comprehension. And there upon the golden throne sat the Emperor of mankind, a god of metal and desiccated flesh, his psychic light brighter than a sun. Kara fell to her knees without being commanded. His voice entered her mind, not as sound, but as revelation. Daughter of a dead sun, you bear the spark of what mankind once aspired to be. Kara's thoughts trembled. You know what I am. You are power unbound by faith, will untempered by obedience. In your heart burns compassion, the rarest commodity in this age. And yet compassion without order breeds ruin. You would save all and destroy the structure that sustains them. Then teach me balance, she thought. Let me serve without becoming what you fear. There was silence, long and eternal. Then the Emperor's golden eyes dimmed slightly. I cannot teach what must be chosen. 3 paths lay before you. 1, to return to your broken realm, to guard it against its own oblivion. 2, to remain here as a free spirit, unclaimed but hunted, a spark of defiance that would ignite heresy. Or 3, to accept my mark, to serve as the blade of mercy, the living embodiment of salvation through order. Kara's thoughts twisted in agony. To live free was to see this galaxy burn. To return home was to abandon it. To serve was to be bound by the very cruelty she opposed. The Emperor's voice softened, barely a whisper across eternity. Compassion is not weakness, child. It is the courage to bear consequence. Choose. And so she chose. Light consumed her, searing away the last trace of Kryptonian purity and binding her essence to the psychic lattice of the Imperium. When she rose, her suit had changed, the blue replaced by the white and gold of sanctified armor. The crest on her chest fused with the double-headed Aquila, one head looking to the stars, the other to mankind. She felt the Emperor's will like a pulse within her veins, not command, but communion. "You will walk among the stars as my hand and heart," his voice said. "When the Imperium forgets mercy, remind them. When chaos consumes the innocent, remind it that light still burns. And if ever your compassion falters, remember that even gods once wept for the worlds they could not save." In the years that followed, the Imperium spoke of the Golden Maiden, the Angel of Soul, the one who descended from the heavens and burned away the darkness with eyes of dawn. On distant worlds, refugees whispered prayers to her image. The ecclesiarchy declared her a living saint, while the Inquisition watched with fearful reverence, knowing that one day her mercy might turn against them. And in the silence of the Golden Throne, the Emperor's gaze lingered upon her, a faint echo of warmth returning to that cold, divine intellect. For in the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, one light remained that dared to shine softly. The years passed, though in the Imperium years meant little. Time was a thing devoured by bureaucracy and faith, and the light of Kara Zor-El burned through it like a blade through silk. They called her the Angel of Soul, Saint Solaris, the Emperor's Hand. Her arrival at any warfront was heralded by songs and incense, by voxcasts describing miracles no servitor could record. Yet she never accepted worship. When the banners rose and the crowd knelt, she only said one thing: "Stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight." She fought beside Sisters of Battle on the black sands of Gathis Prime, her fists breaking demon engines, her heat vision cutting through warp storms. She carried wounded soldiers on her back through fire, shielding them from orbital bombardments. Every victory, however glorious, fed whispers among the ecclesiarchy. "Too bright, too free," they said. "She glows with something not born of the Emperor's will." Inquisitor Devon, now aged and risen within the Ordo, watched those whispers grow like infection. She alone remembered the alien girl who once said that compassion was not weakness, but others saw only a rival to faith. The opportunity for fear came on the crimson world of Calthor Secundus, where chaos had taken root within the remains of a forgotten Primarch's gene cult. The creature leading them was said to be a fragment of that demigod's essence, a half-mortal echo preserved by warp sorcery. They called him the Crimson Sun, the betrayed seed, and entire regiments vanished beneath his shadow. Kara was dispatched with a strike force of Grey Knights and Adepta Sororitas, a holy spear aimed at the heart of blasphemy. When they arrived, the sky itself wept blood. The Crimson Sun awaited her in the ruins of a cathedral once dedicated to the Emperor. His form was monstrous, flesh fused with brass, wings of bone draped in flayed banners. His voice rolled through the ruins like thunder. "You are no saint. You are a lie of light in a universe that feeds on despair." Kara's eyes glowed as she descended through the shattered roof. "I am what they need me to be." The battle that followed defied description. Her speed broke the sound barrier 100 times a minute. The Crimson Sun's axe cleaved through reality, dragging screams from the Immaterium itself. Every blow she landed burned with holy fire granted by the Emperor's sanction. Every wound he dealt hissed with the laughter of the blood god. Grey Knights died by the dozen, chanting litanies even as their armor melted. The sisters sang hymns until their throats turned to ash. At the center of it all, Kara and the Daemon Primarch's echo clashed beneath a sky split by lightning. "You cannot kill an idea," the monster bellowed. "I am vengeance, made flesh." "Then I'll show you mercy," she answered, and plunged her hand through his chest, releasing a surge of light that vaporized everything tainted by warp essence within 100 kilometers. When the smoke cleared, she stood alone amid a crater of glass and bones. Her armor was broken, her cape gone, her hair burned to white. She looked at her reflection in the molten debris and saw not a savior, but a weapon. The Inquisition declared the battle a triumph. The ecclesiarchy canonized her anew, but in the quiet of her sanctum aboard the battle barge Sol Invictus, Kara felt the Emperor's voice once more. "You hesitated," he said. "I spared what could be spared," she replied. "Mercy can birth heresy," he warned. "Without discipline, your compassion may doom what you seek to save. Then teach them to be worthy of it," she whispered. The connection faded. From that day, she fought differently. Not softer, but with sorrow behind every strike. Worlds were liberated in her name. Armies followed her banner not out of fear but faith. A dangerous kind of faith that did not worship the Emperor, but the hope she embodied. The High Lords began to fear her. Some called for her recall to Terra, others for her quiet execution. Devon, older now, stood before the council and defied them all. "If the Emperor made her his light," she said, "then we have no right to dim it." Outside the council chambers, in the void between stars, Kara watched a distant nebula bloom like dawn. She knew the Collectorate still hunted across dimensions, and that chaos never truly died. She also knew the Imperium's fear would one day turn on her. But for now, she flew. Through the endless dark, through burning systems, through the screams and prayers of a species clinging to survival. Each world she saved whispered her name like a forbidden prayer. In the grim darkness of the far future, the Angel of Soul did not fade. She burned, defiant and alone, a reminder that even in an empire built on obedience, one spark of compassion could still defy the void. The whispers became storms. Across the Segmentum Solar, her image adorned shrine walls beside the Emperor's own, her symbol etched into armor plates and painted onto gunships. Pilgrims crossed systems to kneel at the sites she had defended, leaving offerings not to the ecclesiarchy, but to the angel who descended from the stars. The Ministorum called it blasphemy. The Inquisition called it rebellion. To the common people, it was faith reborn. Kara saw none of it at first. She fought on a dozen worlds simultaneously, her body faster than light, her heart breaking with each life lost. But rumors reached her, churches built in her name, prayers spoken to the Saint of Mercy rather than to the Emperor. When she heard this, she fell silent for a long time. "That wasn't what I wanted," she told Devon through the Vox. The Inquisitor's aged voice came back faintly, brittle and weary. "Intent is irrelevant, child. In this Imperium, belief shapes reality. You've become an idea, and ideas are dangerous." Kara's answer was quiet. "Then I'll bear that danger." The next campaign brought her to the world of Orestes Secundus, where the Collectorate had returned. The Kryptonian echo of her people, twisted into cold perfection, had learned from their last defeat. They did not arrive as conquerors, but as saviors, wearing human faces, promising order through assimilation. When Kara descended upon them, the people resisted her intervention. They believed the Collectorate offered peace, and among the Collectorate envoys, she saw him, Connell, the corrupted reflection of her cousin, his body machine-fused and eyes glowing with sterile divinity. "Cousin," he said, his voice a strange harmony of steel and memory, "you were lost to entropy, but I have found purpose. Our people live within the machine. Join me, and we will end pain forever." Kara's heart twisted. "You've ended everything that makes life worth living." The Collectorate fleets darkened the skies. Below, the citizens of Orestes knelt in awe as the mechanical seraphim descended. The Inquisition ordered orbital bombardment. Kara refused. "I won't slaughter innocents because they've been deceived," the order repeated. She still refused. And so she went alone, diving through the atmosphere like a spear of gold. The Collectorate fired upon her with weapons that folded gravity itself. She moved faster, through explosions, through collapsing buildings, through screams and prayer. She found Connell at the heart of the main citadel, plugged into a tower of neural metal that reached into orbit. "You can't stop it," he said calmly. "Our code has merged with the warp signal. We are evolution. You are an echo of chaos disguised as virtue." "Maybe," she whispered, "but at least my chaos still loves." She ripped the tower apart with her bare hands. The feedback tore across the planet. Data turned to fire. The collectorate ships screamed in digital agony as their cores overloaded. Connell reached for her even as he burned, and for a fleeting instant, the machine facade flickered. His eyes were blue again. "Forgive me," he said before the light consumed him. The world burned for 7 days. When it ended, the surface of Orestes was glass, and the Inquisition's fleet demanded her surrender. She did not answer. Devaughn pleaded over encrypted vox. "They fear what they can't control, Kara. Come home." "Home?" Kara murmured. "I don't have one anymore." For the first time since the Golden Throne, she felt the Emperor's presence directly, not as command, but as question. "Why did you spare them?" he asked. "Because mercy is the only rebellion left," she answered. Silence followed, heavy and eternal, and then his voice faded into the void. From that day, she was never seen on Terra again. Some said she fell in battle against the Collectorate's Second Fleet. Others claimed she ascended beyond the material, absorbed into the Astronomicon itself. But the pilgrims still see her light. On dead worlds, amid the ruins of forgotten cathedrals, when the night is longest, a figure of white and gold walks the ashes, eyes like dawn, whispering, "Stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight." And in the endless war that devours all hope, the Imperium still remembers the Angel of Soul, not as a saint or heretic, but as the impossible reminder that even in the far future where there is only war, compassion once dared to exist. The legend of the Angel of Soul spread like wildfire through the Imperium, twisting through faith and rumor, until no one could tell where truth ended and myth began. The ecclesiarchy tried to contain it, branding her likeness, forbidden, purging temples built in her name. But the people only whispered louder. They said she walked worlds, moments before they fell, saving those too weak to flee. They said her light burned brighter than any sun, and that even demons hesitated in her presence to some. She was divine intervention to others. A dangerous echo of heresy, but to the common soldier dying in the mud, she was the last promise that the Emperor still watched over mankind. She became both weapon and warning, a symbol the Imperium could neither claim nor destroy. In the dark vaults of the Inquisition, the High Lords argued endlessly. Devaughn's voice, older, frailer, but still steel cut through the chamber. "If you kill hope, you make chaos stronger." But the Ordo Malleus answered, "If you let it live, you make gods of mortals." And in that stalemate she endured, unseen, unheard, moving, where war screamed loudest. It was on the fractured moon of Hestaran 9 that her story reached its turning point. Chaos had returned not as army, but as plague. A living curse. Feeding on despair, entire cities turned to crystallized agony, their citizens frozen mid-scream as warp energy consumed their souls. The Grey Knights called it uncontainable. The Mechanicus called it mathematically impossible. Kara simply called it another life worth saving. She descended alone. Her armor cracked, her energy nearly gone since Orestes, but her will unbroken. She found the source, deep beneath the surface. A rift, pulsing like a heart of lightless blood. From it rose a figure vast and formless, the demon of despair itself, a being older than names. It spoke directly into her mind. "Child of the lost sun, you shine against entropy, but light feeds. Shadow, the brighter you burn, the stronger I become." She hovered in silence, feeling the pressure of its presence trying to drown her thoughts. Every memory of failure, every death she could not prevent, came flooding back. The planets she couldn't save, the innocents lost, the faces that pleaded before vanishing into dust. And for the first time since her arrival in this cursed reality, she faltered. The demon laughed, reality bending around its glee. See, even the purest light dies here. And then from within that collapsing darkness, another voice reached her. Not the Emperor's, not Devon's, not any mortals. It was the faint echo of her cousin Cal, the memory of what hope used to mean. You are not here to win Kara, you are here to remind them that losing isn't the end. She opened her eyes, and the void around her blazed with gold. Every scar, every failure became fuel. She rose higher than she had ever flown, her voice shaking the cavern. Then let them remember. She plunged into the rift. The explosion swallowed Hestaran 9. The moon shattered, the warp storm collapsed, and across the system, light washed the night away. When the dust settled, nothing remained of the Angel of Soul, only a crater that glowed faintly for centuries. Tech priests claimed it emitted residual psychic radiation. The Sisters of Battle declared it holy ground. The Inquisition called it an anomaly. The people called it a miracle on terror in the silence of the Golden Throne. The Emperor's eyes opened for the briefest moment, a golden tear cutting through the dust of 10,000 years, and then closing again in the distant void, beyond time, where matter and memory blur. A figure of white and gold drifted her cape, flowing like solar fire. Her eyes sought, her expression calm. She whispered into the endless dark, "If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight." And somewhere far below, on another dying world, a child looked up at the sky and saw a single streak of light cutting through the storm. Not a star, not a ship, but something else. Something that made them believe again. And in that fragile moment of belief, the galaxy shifted ever so slightly toward hope. Centuries passed, yet her name refused to fade. It echoed through the prayers of soldiers, through the confessions of dying priests, through the code chants of machine spirits who could not understand faith but felt its weight. The Angel of Soul had become more than myth. She was memory made light, a story whispered by dying lips in the trenches of 1,000 wars. The ecclesiarchy still hunted her image, burning cathedrals that dared to paint her face beside the Emperor's, but each flame they lit only spread her legend further. On worlds cut off from the Astronomicon, when the warp storms swallowed the stars, there were reports of a woman of light walking through the void, guiding lost ships back to safety. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it impossible, a mirage created by cosmic radiation. The Inquisition called it propaganda meant to weaken the authority of the Emperor. But the people, the nameless and the broken, they called it grace. Deep within the archives of Mars, a single servitor maintained a file marked Hereticus Alpha, Kara Zor L, status unknown. Its programming forbade prayer, yet each cycle it paused its work to replay the sound of her last transmission, a single sentence distorted by time and static. Mercy is strength. The Inquisition tried to erase it, but data has memory, and memory, like belief, cannot be destroyed. Across the Imperium, statues once carved for saints forgotten by history were quietly rededicated to her. The Sisterhood of the Golden Light, an outlawed order of nuns and former soldiers, swore their oaths in her name, taking vows not of obedience, but of compassion. They fought without banners, appearing where the Emperor's will was twisted into cruelty, healing those deemed unworthy, saving those condemned. They called themselves her daughters, and when they fell, they died with a single prayer. Let her light find us. In the endless darkness of space, beyond the reach of terror, beyond even the edge of the Astronomicon's glow, a figure drifted through the void. She no longer wore armor or cape, only light. Her body had become the memory of itself, her voice a current through the warp. She saw the Imperium from afar, its fleets warring endlessly, its faith hardened into iron, its hope buried under blood and bureaucracy. And still she smiled. For every world that burned, another still prayed. For every tyrant that ruled, one heart still defied fear. For every sin humanity committed, one soul still looked to the stars and believed in something better. She could not end the war. She could not silence the gods of chaos, but she could exist. And sometimes, existence itself was rebellion. On the eve of the 43rd millennium, when the galaxy once again threatened to collapse under its own hatred, a great rift opened above the throne world. For an instant, even the Emperor's golden light flickered. The High Lords panicked. The Inquisition prepared exterminatus protocols. Then a single flare of white radiance split the heavens. It was not a ship. It was not a weapon. It was a voice that burned across every vox frequency in the Imperium, across every mind that still knew how to feel. "Stand," it said. "If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight." And for that heartbeat, across 10,000 worlds, soldiers rose. Sisters sang, children wept, priests hesitated before condemning. Somewhere, far beyond sight, the Angel of Soul drifted between realities, her eyes calm, her heart endless. Hope had become her eternal form, and as long as one human heart remembered mercy, she would never fade. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, one light remained that refused to bow, refused to kneel, refused to die. The Imperium never truly understood what it had witnessed that day. Some claimed the light above Terra was a warp phenomenon, a mirage caused by fluctuations in the Astronomicon. Others swore it was divine intervention, a manifestation of the Emperor's will given shape once more. The High Lords sealed the event within classified archives, rewriting the records to call it the dawn flare of M42, an unexplained celestial anomaly. But in the hearts of the people, the truth could not be hidden. Across the hive cities of mankind, graffiti bloomed like rebellion carved into ferrocrete walls, a simple sigil of an S wrapped within the imperial aquila. The ecclesiarchy sent witch hunters to erase it. For every one they burned, 10 more appeared. The legend of the Angel of Soul returned not as faith, but as memory, a secret language of those who still dreamed. The Inquisition intensified their purges, purging texts, silencing witnesses, rewriting sermons to remove her name. But something deeper than words had already taken root. In the haunted depths of the warp, where the ruinous powers feasted on despair, the gods themselves stirred. Horn roared in fury that mercy had triumphed even for a heartbeat. Zinch laughed at the irony of hope, surviving in a realm that devoured it. Nurgle whispered that compassion was a disease that would outlast death. And Slanesh smiled, delighted by the purity of a soul that could not be corrupted. They reached for her, seeking to twist her light into their image. But they could not find her. She was no longer matter nor soul, only purpose. Somewhere beyond the warp's edge, Kara floated through a sea of fractured stars, watching timelines unfold like ripples through eternity. She saw Earth, the one she had once known, still fragile, still fighting, unaware of the sister reality that had consumed her life. She saw her cousins standing beneath a yellow sun, smiling at people who would never know what she had become. For a moment, she felt sorrow, not for her own fate, but for the simple beauty she had lost, a world without endless war, a sky without screaming. But even sorrow was fuel. She whispered into the void, her voice traveling not through sound, but through meaning itself. "Protect them, Cal. Protect them all." The words reached no ears, yet the stars themselves seemed to listen. Back in the Imperium, the Sisterhood of the Golden Light grew into a movement that could no longer be erased. They carried no banners, wore no insignia, but their presence turned battles. In their wake, civilians lived, orphans found safety, and broken soldiers remembered what they fought for. They claimed no divine authority, yet wherever they appeared, demons faltered and warp storms waned. Even the Grey Knights began to speak of them with a quiet respect, as if sensing in them an echo of something older, purer, unbound by the grim machinery of faith. On Terra itself, rumors whispered through the halls of the Imperial Palace that the Emperor stirred more often now, that his light burned steadier within the warp, that for the first time in 10,000 years, his psychic flame no longer trembled beneath the weight of despair. And among the custodies, those who had guarded the throne since the dawn of his silence. One ancient sentinel told a forbidden tale. He said that when the rift opened above Terra, and that light bathed the throne room, the Emperor's lips had moved, whispering a single word no machine could record: daughter. It was never confirmed, but in the deep sanctums of Mars, where machine and soul intertwined, the Mechanicus began to worship a new algorithm called the Principle of Soul, a sacred formula that defined mercy as an equation capable of stabilizing warp entropy. To the uninitiated, it was heresy, but to those who understood the pattern, it was perfection. And so the galaxy turned once more into its endless war, blood against blood, faith against reason, chaos against survival. Yet in the spaces between, a glow endured, faint but eternal. Sometimes, a ship lost in the warp would find its course corrected by a beam of light no Geller field could explain. Sometimes a dying soldier would feel a hand on his shoulder and hear a voice whisper, "Stand." Sometimes, beneath the shadow of chaos, a demon would pause, hesitate, and retreat, not from fear, but from recognition. The Angel of Soul had become more than a story. She was balance given form, compassion weaponized against annihilation, the quiet defiance of one heart that refused to surrender. And as the 43rd millennium bled into the next, her light continued to flicker through the storm, never fading, never yielding, reminding gods and men alike that even in the end, hope was not a weakness. It was the one truth that could not be killed. The centuries bled into millennia, and the Imperium decayed further beneath its own contradictions, a machine of faith devouring itself to stay alive. But in the hidden corners of the galaxy, something strange endured. Where once the Astronomicon burned as a single, blinding point of psychic light, new whispers began among the navigators. They spoke of a faint second pulse, golden and soft, that shimmered in the deep beyond, not bright enough to guide fleets, but warm enough to steady minds. They called it the Soul Trace, though none dared record it in official logs for fear of ecclesiarchal censure. Some said it was a malfunction in the warp. Others said it was the Emperor's breath finding voice through the void. But among those who remembered the lost stories of Kara Zor-El, the Angel of Soul, there was only one interpretation. It was her. No shrine bore her likeness openly, yet her mark appeared in the most unlikely places, carved in the armor of rogue traders who saved rather than exploited, etched into the hulls of refugee vessels that slipped past blockades, whispered by assassins of the Officio Assassinorum as they stayed their blades from unjust killings. Her legend evolved into something untraceable, a virus of mercy spreading through the veins of an empire built on obedience and fear. It terrified the High Lords, who ruled through despair, but they could not crush it, for it had no center, no leader, no temple. It lived only in the choices of those who still believed that light mattered. On the fringes of Segmentum Pacificus, on a world consumed by civil war between heretics and loyalists, a lone sister of the Golden Light tended to the dying in a bombed-out cathedral. The air was thick with ash and decay, the sky torn by orbital fire. As the sister knelt beside a mortally wounded guardsman, he grasped her hand weakly and asked, "Does the Emperor still love us?" She hesitated, then smiled softly. "He never stopped," she said, though her eyes drifted upward toward the faint golden shimmer piercing the clouds. The dying soldier looked too, and for a moment the bombardment fell silent. The flames dimmed. The world held its breath. Above them, the shape of a woman shimmered, woven from light, her cape rippling like the wings of dawn. The sister wept, and every survivor on that world would later swear that the angel herself had stood between them and death, her voice echoing across the storm. "Stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight." When the bombardment resumed, the shells landed harmlessly in the wastes outside the city. The Inquisition investigated and found no weapon, no shield, no technological explanation, only a lingering residue of psychic energy too pure to measure. They classified it as divine anomaly and sealed the report, but the sister's words spread through the ranks of the Astra Militarum until whole regiments went to battle whispering that same phrase before the charge. "Stand, fight, Remember mercy. It became their creed, their rebellion against the despair that devoured mankind. And deep within the Golden Throne, where time did not flow but merely existed as memory, the Emperor dreamed. He saw through the veil of the warp, past the screaming tides of chaos. And in the distance, he saw her, his lost angel, his luminous paradox still moving through the dark. Her light, small but constant. The Emperor, bound in his eternal half-life, could not smile, but his psychic presence pulsed faintly, resonating with something almost human, something forgotten across 10,000 years of godhood. For the first time in an age, the Astronomicon flared brighter, and the souls of billions felt a warmth they could not name. In the warp, the dark gods trembled, Horn's endless rage cracked, Sench's plans blurred, Nurgle's laughter dimmed, and even Slanesh's song faltered for a heartbeat. The light that had no source, no doctrine, and no chains passed through them all and left nothing but silence. And in that silence, the universe remembered that even endless war could not erase compassion. It could be buried, it could be mocked, it could be outlawed, but it could not die. Somewhere beyond the Immaterium, beyond even the warp's bleeding edge, Kara drifted still, her consciousness interwoven with the golden threads of possibility that stitched the cosmos together. She saw realities collapse and reform, civilizations rise and fall, gods born and broken. She saw what mankind might become if it ever remembered what it was fighting for. And as she watched, she whispered to every flicker of life, every spark of defiance, every being that still chose kindness in a world that demanded cruelty. "You are my legacy," she said. "You are my purpose." On the eve of the 55th millennium, when the Imperium faced its greatest twilight and the Astronomicon dimmed to a single flickering ember, the soul trace brightened once more, spanning across the galaxy like the breath of dawn. Lost fleets found their way home. Planets long abandoned flickered back to life. On Terra, the dormant machinery of the Golden Throne pulsed in rhythm with that distant light, and for a single heartbeat, every servant within the palace heard the same voice inside their minds. "I am not gone," it said. "I am with you." And then the silence returned, leaving only the faint golden shimmer upon the horizon of eternity. It was enough. In a galaxy where hope was treason, the Angel of Soul remained its greatest heresy and its most enduring truth. The 55th millennium collapsed into ruinous centuries of silence, a time historians would later name the Dim Era, when the Astronomicon flickered and the Imperium devoured itself in confusion and faithless war. Records were lost, worlds vanished, fleets drifted untended through endless void, yet still whispers endured. In the depths of hive cathedrals, old priests spoke of a light that had once crossed the heavens and returned warmth to dying suns. In the manufactorums of Mars, Magi debated the forbidden theory that emotion itself could stabilize warp fluctuations, citing fragments of the soul principle preserved in hidden data shrines. Inquisitors hunted them, burned them, erased them. Still, the rumor lived, because belief, once born, cannot be killed by fear. Somewhere beyond the veil of reality, where the warp bled into raw creation, Kara Zor-El drifted among the ashes of forgotten stars. Her consciousness had transcended flesh and time alike, woven now into the lattice of existence itself. Neither god nor ghost, but something infinitely gentler. The warp whispered to her, as it whispered to all things. "Serve," it hissed. "Become divine. Become worship. Become power." She never answered. She remembered too clearly what power had done to every soul that sought to own it. Instead, she wandered, unseen, invisible, moving between realities like a thought between breaths. Each time a mortal showed mercy when wrath was easier, each time a child reached for another's hand in fear instead of hate, she felt it like a spark against the endless dark. Those sparks became constellations. Those constellations became her map. Through them, she traced the evolution of mankind. It was slow, painful, drenched in blood, But through the centuries, a change began. Small at first, imperceptible to the High Lords and their endless councils, but real. Commanders began sparing enemies who surrendered. Priests began preaching duty without cruelty. Machines once designed only to kill were repurposed to heal. The Sisterhood of the Golden Light, long thought extinct, resurfaced under a new name, the Soul Ascendants. They wore plain armor, no sigils, no creed, only a faint emblem burned into the inner lining of their gauntlets, the S within the Aquila. They called it the Sign of Two Wings. When asked what it meant, they simply said, balance. They fought alongside the Astra Militarum, yet took no orders. They answered to no one, not even the Inquisition. Wherever they appeared, victory followed, but never triumph. They left no relics, no altars, only survivors. Entire planets began to tell stories of nameless angels descending from the clouds to lift the wounded. The ecclesiarchy could not suppress all of them. Even some within the Adeptus Custodes began to speak quietly among themselves of a presence they had once witnessed in the throne room, a glow that had stood beside the golden throne when the Emperor's heart nearly failed, stabilizing it with unseen warmth. The ancient among them swore they had seen her form, veiled in radiance, resting one hand on the Emperor's arm, as though reminding him that even gods must be loved to endure. On the 1000th anniversary of that event, the warp itself trembled. Chaos raged with renewed hunger, sensing the weakening of mankind's fear. Armageddon burned. Cadia fell again in spirit if not stone, and for the first time since the Great Rift's birth, the galaxy stood on the edge of final collapse. Then came the second dawn flare. The Astronomicon did not fade this time. It fractured, splitting into two streams of light, one blinding, imperial gold, the other gentle, silver white. Together they formed a spiral across the void, a living corridor through the warp. Entire fleets emerged unscathed, guided by voices no navigator could identify. Across Vox channels, soldiers heard a single phrase repeated in unison across 10,000 tongues. Mercy endures. On Terra, alarms screamed, shrines shook, the golden throne pulsed with light, and for one impossible moment, the Emperor opened his eyes. Those present described the air itself vibrating with the sound of wings. The Emperor did not speak aloud, but every soul on the planet heard his thought. She is not gone. From the throne's halo of gold stepped a figure the color of dawn, neither flesh nor flame, her form shifting between woman and light. She looked upon the Emperor, the corpse god of mankind, and bowed her head. You kept them alive, she said. Now teach them to live. And though no sound passed his withered lips, his mind thundered through the galaxy. Together then, the warp screamed as if wounded. The four gods recoiled, their dominions shuddering under the sudden harmony of two lights uniting, divine order and infinite compassion, bound at last. Across the galaxy, warp storms calmed, demon worlds dissolved, and the veil between realities thinned into calm seas of quiet starlight. Humanity did not ascend, nor did it fall, it simply breathed. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it the Restoration Pulse. The Sisters of Battle named it the Second Dawn. To the nameless and the poor, it was simply salvation. Kara felt the cosmos settling beneath her touch, not healed, but still breathing. She turned her gaze one last time toward the stars she had loved and whispered to the Emperor, to her cousin lost in another realm, to every mortal who had ever dared to hope. Remember mercy. It is the only victory worth earning. Then her light dispersed into the fabric of the Astronomicon, blending with the Emperor's will until neither could be told apart. And from that day onward, when humanity looked to the stars for guidance, they no longer saw one beacon, but two, twin flames, gold and silver, burning side by side forever. Proof that even in the grim darkness of the far future, the universe had not forgotten how to forgive. 1,000 more years passed before anyone dared to speak her name aloud again. But by then, the Imperium itself had changed. It was still a realm of war and devotion, still a cathedral built upon corpses and fear. But beneath that ancient machinery of faith, a quiet shift had taken root. Mercy had become strategy, compassion had become strength. Entire planetary governors began to value preservation as much as conquest. And in the hidden temples of terror, the Sisters of the Golden Light, now recognized openly as an official order, whispered that the Angel of Soul had never vanished, that her spirit had been bound to the Astronomicon itself, guiding humanity in silence beside the Emperor's own mind. No one dared to record it officially, but the navigators felt it in every voyage. The warp had grown calmer, the storms less hungry, and through that silver-gold radiance, they sometimes glimpsed two figures within the heart of the beacon, one burning bright as a star, the other soft as dawn. Together, keeping the madness at bay, the High Lords of Terror no longer questioned this miracle. They simply accepted it, for the Imperium had endured the longest night imaginable, and only through that dual light had it survived. When the second dawn came to its end, the Emperor's throne room was bathed in living brilliance. The custodes fell to one knee, and even the Mechanicus Magi wept machine oil like tears, for they understood that divinity had changed forever. The corpse god was no longer silent within his vast psychic form. A second presence had joined him, not as servant, not as saint, but as balance. The harmony of rule and mercy woven into one perfect signal. The Astronomicon became more than a beacon. It became a song. The navigators, who once suffered madness, now wept as they charted courses, guided by melody rather than pain. Humanity began to rebuild what it had long forgotten. Cities once forged for war turned into sanctuaries. Children were raised not to worship fear, but to understand strength as protection. The sisterhood of the Golden Light spread across the stars, their scripture only one phrase written in every tongue: stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight. And it became the creed of a new age, the age of soul. The old institutions resisted. The ecclesiarchy tried to twist the story to fit its dogma, declaring the angel merely an avatar of the Emperor's mercy. But the people knew better. They spoke of her as his equal, and for the first time in millennia, that belief did not bring execution, it brought peace. The Inquisition fractured into sects. Those who clung to old tyranny were purged by their own. Those who embraced her teachings became wardens instead of destroyers. Their motto, simple safeguard before judgment. Within the warp, the great enemy howled. The gods of chaos, torn by the resonance of balance, Khorne's rage burned hollow. Tzi-Ench's plots unraveled. Slanesh's pleasure turned to silence, and Nurgle's rot withered into dust. They would never die entirely, for conflict is eternal, but their dominion was broken, weakened by the one truth they could not twist. Mercy had entered the fabric of reality itself. It was no longer an act of will. It was a constant like gravity, unyielding, unending. In a hidden corner of the galaxy, far from terror, a farmer on a resurrected world named Orestes looked up one night at the twin lights that ruled the heavens, one gold, one silver, and told his daughter a story he had learned from his grandmother that long ago, before even the Emperor had spoken. There was a woman who fell from the stars to teach mankind to rise again. The little girl asked if the woman was still watching, and the farmer smiled, pointing at the sky always. He said, she watches, so long as we do not forget to stand. And in that moment, light fell across the field, soft, warm, infinite. The wind carried her voice across the stars, not in words, but in feeling, pride, sorrow, love, hope. The galaxy heard it, the warp heard it. Even the Emperor himself felt it within his ageless soul. And he spoke back for the first time since creation. Thank you, Kara. The light pulsed brighter across the cosmos. Two eternal flames, one born of power, one born of compassion, shining together above the endless night. And for the first time since humanity learned the meaning of fear, there was something stronger in the universe than war. It was not victory, it was not salvation, it was remembrance. The memory of a single being who refused to yield, who turned mercy into weapon, who proved that even in the grim darkness of the far future, the brightest light was not conquest or divinity, but love itself. 10,000 years after the second dawn, the galaxy no longer burned, but it never truly healed. The Imperium of man had become something vast and strange, still holy in its obsession, still violent in its nature, yet quieter in its purpose. The Emperor no longer ruled as an absent god, but as a mind of balance, bound to another presence whose light softened the weight of eternity. Kara Zor-El, the Angel of Soul, had not vanished. She existed within the Astronomicon itself, her soul woven into the pulse of the golden beacon, her voice merged with the Emperor's to guide humanity through the void. Together they became a harmony that stretched across reality, the Song of Soul. A melody that turned madness into calm. Navigators no longer wept blood when gazing into the warp. They spoke of warmth, of silver gold light that danced between the stars, of voices that whispered, "Stand and remember who you are." Across the Imperium, those words became law. Armies repeated them before battle, priests recited them in sermons, and even dying soldiers gasped them as their last prayer. The sisterhood of the golden light grew into a force that shaped the Imperium's soul. They built no cathedrals, raised no banners, and sought no worship, yet their presence changed entire systems. Where they walked, planets healed. Where they fought, demons faltered. Their creed remained carved in every fortress they left behind. Mercy is strength. Kindness is war's final victory. On Terra, the Golden Throne still burned, but its light no longer blinded. The Emperor's will flowed through the cosmos, and Kara's compassion tempered it, ensuring his justice did not become tyranny. The High Lords ruled in name only, their decrees shadows beneath the twin glow that now filled the Palace of Light. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus evolved, accepting that machine and soul were one. They rewrote their hymns to include emotion as code and worship not only perfection but empathy. The Inquisition fractured, purging those who sought control and preserving those who pursued truth. The Grey Knights fought with serenity rather than rage, their blades ignited by belief rather than fury. The warp itself began to change. The Chaos Gods howled in rage, their thrones cracking beneath the weight of something they could not consume. Horn's rivers of blood slowed, Tzeentch's endless schemes unraveled, Slaanesh's song turned hollow, Nurgle's garden withered into silence. Mercy had infected the Immaterium, an emotion they could not feed upon. The balance between darkness and light, once broken, now pulsed with fragile rhythm. Humanity still fought, but it no longer fought alone. In the depths of space, beyond the edge of known reality, Kara drifted as pure consciousness, her form no longer bound by flesh or gravity. She watched the world she had given everything to protect and saw cities rebuilding, children laughing beneath skies once black with ash, and fleets sailing through the void, guided by her light. Her voice echoed through creation, soft and infinite. "You were never meant to be gods," she whispered. "You were meant to be kind." On distant planets, the people looked up and saw two stars shining together, one golden, one silver. They called them the twin hearts of soul. For the first time in history, the galaxy was united not by fear, but by memory. A farmer on a distant world told his daughter that once there had been a woman who fell from the heavens to teach mankind to stand. A dying soldier on a forgotten battlefield smiled when the light touched his face and whispered her name. Even the Emperor, in the silence of his eternal throne, felt her presence beside him and spoke words none had heard in 10,000 years. "Thank you." The Astronomicon flared brighter, its song reaching every soul that still believed in something greater than survival. The warp trembled, not from rage, but from awe, and for the first time since the birth of mankind's empire, peace touched the stars. It was not complete, it was not perfect, but it was real. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there had only been war, there was now something else. There was balance, there was memory, there was love. 100,000 years passed before anyone dared to claim the galaxy was finally at peace. Yet even peace in the Imperium was carved from struggle and shadow. The twin lights of gold and silver that had once been myth were now accepted truth, their glow stretching across the void like veins of divine fire. The Astronomicon no longer guided fleets alone, it guided hearts. Children born on hive worlds could feel its pulse in their dreams, beating in rhythm with their own. The priests of the new Soul Dominion taught that mercy was not the absence of war, but the redemption within it. That strength without compassion was corruption, and compassion without strength was surrender. Humanity had not transcended conflict, for war was part of its blood, but it had learned to fight for something greater than survival. It fought for balance. The Sisterhood of the Golden Light became the guardians of this age, their armor pale as dawn, and their eyes marked with a faint shimmer of starlight. They no longer wielded weapons of death, but relics that could calm storms and silence warp rifts. The Grey Knights called them the Voices of Soul and refused to battle without their blessing. The Adeptus Mechanicus changed beyond recognition. They merged machine and emotion, logic and empathy, until their hymns were half code and half prayer. Their forges glowed not red with molten steel, but white with creative energy. They built starships that sang, constructs that healed, engines that resonated with thought. The Inquisition itself transformed into a council of philosophers, historians, and oracles, dedicated not to purge, but to preserve. Where once they burned books, they now protected them. The galaxy's libraries swelled with knowledge that had been feared for 10 millennia. On Terra, the Emperor remained on his throne, but the throne was no longer a prison. The machinery that sustained his body became one with Kara's essence, a vessel for both power and compassion. His face, once withered and lifeless, now glowed faintly with gold and silver light. The people no longer knelt in fear before him, but stood before his image with reverence, understanding that faith was not submission, but trust. In the warp, the Chaos Gods had not died, but they had diminished. They whispered from the edges of reality, feeding on scraps of hatred and despair, waiting for weakness to return. Yet even their whispers grew faint beneath the Song of Soul. That song was everywhere now. It echoed in the minds of navigators, in the prayers of children, in the pulse of dying stars. It was carried by the wind of planets and the hum of machines. It became the heartbeat of creation itself, and in that rhythm, Kara still lived. Her essence drifted between galaxies, watching new species rise, some peaceful, some violent, all searching for purpose. She no longer intervened directly, for humanity had learned her lessons. But when the balance wavered, when cruelty threatened to return, her light flickered once more through the warp like a warning. On one such day, a new darkness emerged from the edge of existence. It was not chaos, not Xenos, but something older, something that predated gods and men alike. The void itself began to stir, and across the galaxy, stars dimmed. The priests called it the Great Eclipse. Scientists called it entropy made sentient. The Emperor felt it first. Within the throne, his golden eyes opened, their reflection mirrored in the silver shimmer beside him. "It has begun," he said. Kara's voice answered, soft but unwavering. "Then we face it together." Across the Imperium, every soul felt a tremor within their spirit. Fleets mobilized, planets fortified. The Sisterhood gathered on Terra, chanting the ancient creed. Stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight. The Astronomicon flared like a second sun, its song rising into a crescendo that reached even beyond the warp. For the first time in history, every human mind in the galaxy turned toward a single purpose. The golden and silver light merged once more, becoming one blinding radiance that stretched through every system, through every world, through every soul. Kara stood beside the Emperor, her form radiant, her hair like threads of sunlight, her eyes filled with endless calm. The great eclipse rose before them, a shadow devouring the stars, a hunger that wanted not to rule, but to erase. The warp screamed. Time folded, reality bent. And through it all, her voice remained steady. You cannot erase what remembers. The light burst outward, touching the edges of the void, turning darkness to glass. The shadow shuddered, consuming itself in confusion. The galaxy trembled as every ship, every planet, every being saw her standing there, facing the end without fear. I am mercy, she said, and mercy endures. The words carried through eternity. The shadow fractured, the stars reignited, the warp calmed. When the light faded, there was silence. The Emperor sat upon his throne, eyes closed, his hand resting upon an invisible presence that shimmered faintly in the air. And though Kara's form had vanished, her light had not. It flowed through every living thing, every machine, every drop of blood that carried human will. The great eclipse was gone, but its memory remained, a reminder that even nothingness could not conquer what loved. The Imperium stood reborn, no longer an empire of fear, but a civilization of remembrance. The people no longer prayed for salvation, they became it. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there had always been war, there was now something greater. There was peace born of struggle, love born of ruin, and the eternal echo of a voice that refused to fade. Hope endures. 1,000,000 years had passed since the second dawn, and still the light of the Astronomicon glowed across the stars, steady and alive. The Imperium no longer called itself an empire. It had become something else entirely, something gentler and wiser than its creators could ever have imagined. The High Lords were long gone, their names erased by time, their monuments buried beneath new cities built not on conquest, but on cooperation. Terra itself had changed. Once the throne world of power and fear, it had become a sanctuary, a garden wrapped in golden light where pilgrims no longer crawled in worship but walked in peace. The golden throne still stood, but it was not a prison of machinery anymore. It was a temple of balance, half living, half light. Within its vast structure, the Emperor and Kara remained, their essences intertwined in endless unity. They no longer ruled, for there was no need. Humanity had learned to lead itself. Every world, every system, every colony carried a piece of their light within. The warp had grown quiet. Chaos had not been destroyed, but it had been transformed. Its hunger turned inward until it devoured only itself. The great gods had become whispers of memory, reduced to the smallest echoes of emotion buried deep within sentient minds. Rage had become courage. Change had become wisdom. Desire had become creation. Decay had become rest. Even the Immaterium had found its peace. The sisterhood of the golden light had passed into legend, their order dissolved not through destruction, but fulfillment. Their work was done. Their creed had become humanity's nature. Every man, every woman, every child carried their vow like instinct. Mercy is strength. Compassion is defiance. Hope is survival. Those words had replaced fear. They were written into the genetic memory of mankind. The galaxy was no longer ruled by war. It was ruled by will. The forges of Mars no longer built weapons. They built wonders. Ships of crystal and steel that moved through the void without disturbing it. Engines that sang like choirs. Machines that felt love for their makers. The Adeptus Mechanicus had transcended dogma, merging mind and machine until there was no boundary between life and logic. The Grey Knights had become the wardens of balance, no longer hunters of demons, but teachers of inner strength. The Inquisition had long faded, replaced by the Ordo Solis, a council of thinkers who guarded truth instead of hiding it. Humanity had not become perfect, but it had become aware, and awareness was victory. In the center of it all, the light of terror pulsed like a heartbeat. It was not bright or blinding, but warm and constant, a reminder of two souls who had given everything to keep the stars alive. The people called them the Twin Flames, the Emperor of Gold and the Angel of Silver, the God of Will and the Spirit of Mercy. But they had no need for titles, no desire for worship. They existed only as harmony, two voices singing the same eternal song. Sometimes, across the quiet galaxy, when the wind moved through the ruins of ancient battlefields, or the waves brushed the shores of reborn worlds, that song could still be heard. It was the sound of peace breathing. It was the echo of what once was. In the farthest corner of known space, on a planet untouched by civilization, a child stood beneath a sky of two suns. The child's mother pointed upward and told a story as old as humanity itself. She spoke of the woman who fell from the heavens and taught the galaxy to stand. She spoke of the God who found his heart again through her light. The child listened, eyes wide, and asked if the story was true. The mother smiled, watching the twin lights glow above them. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "It's true because we remember." Far above, beyond time and beyond thought, Kara Zor-El drifted within the song of the cosmos. Her form was no longer bound to flesh, her voice no longer carried by air. She had become something greater, a truth written into the stars themselves. She could see everything now, every life born, every spark of kindness, every act of courage. Humanity had not become perfect, but it had become worthy. The Emperor's presence pulsed beside her, silent but content. She felt his gratitude as a warmth across her essence. "You gave them balance," his thoughts said. She smiled, her voice like starlight. "No," she answered. "They found it themselves." The two lights pulsed once more, a final gesture of unity before fading gently into the flow of creation. The galaxy no longer needed gods. It had itself. The stars burned brighter than ever, before, no longer as beacons of war, but as symbols of endurance. The warp remained calm. Life flourished, and in every corner of existence, from the heart of Terra to the smallest forgotten moon, there was always one constant truth, passed down through every generation in every form of language that would ever exist. Stand. If you have strength to kneel, you have strength to fight. If you have the will to fight, you have the power to love. And if you can love, then no darkness, no God, and no eternity can ever defeat you. That was her legacy. That was her truth. The Angel of Soul had not died. She had simply become the universe's heartbeat. And in the grim darkness of what was once a future of war, light remained, not as salvation, not as victory, but as the everlasting reminder that mercy is eternal.